What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do we have a special guest. My good friend, Nathanael Chawkin, is in the house. What's up, Nathanael?
Hello, my friend. So happy to be here with you again.
I know, man. It's been too long since we've gotten to spend time. It's been a few months since I've seen you, but it's been too long since we've spent time on the show. Do you mind if I do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get started?
Let's do it.
So for listeners who are new to the show, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. We're about people living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And Nathanael is neither short of passion or greatness. He's actually a former guest of the show. So we had a great show. It was probably 24 months ago. I don't even remember when it was. It was a while ago.
Just about 2 years. Yeah, I went back and listened to it. It was great.
Yeah, it was an amazing episode. 2 years ago, we connected. I think it was during my book launch, which it'll be 2 years next week, and had a great episode talking about conscious leadership and how people need to level up and how they can really level up in their life and in their business through some of the practices that Nathanael teaches. So many fun times, but so much has changed in the last 2 years. The world's changed. I've changed. You've changed. And so here we are back again. I'd love to give a little bit of our background on how we know each other for listeners who have not heard our previous episode. Does that work for you, Nathanael, if I go there really quickly?
And there's some good stories there too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nathanael and I, we met. He and I actually come from. We were both out of the Stagen program. I was in Stagen. I did Stagen, which is the Integral Leadership Program in 2019 and 2020. And you did work there. You were a coach there. We did not run into each other there, but we both have some roots, which this is a conscious leadership program based out of Dallas, Texas. A good friend of mine, Marco Gargenta, who runs a company called Plus Plus, told us about this amazing coach he's working with, Nathanael Chawkin, and I didn't know that you had come out of Stagen at that point. And we did a CEO forum retreat at Esalen in Big Sur. And for people that don't know what Esalen is, it's kind of this like sacred place on the ocean overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I think the final scene of Mad Men takes place with
that's right.
Don Draper at Esalen.
Finding himself, yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this place where you go to.
That's a good metaphor. Actually, I think we're going to get some use out of that later.
And so we met in Esalen actually at a picnic table, and this is
Marco.
3 years.
Actually, just to interrupt really quickly, Marco said, "I want to introduce you to my forum. How about September 13th?" I'm like, "That's the one weekend I can't because I'm co-leading an event at Esalen." And he's like, "What event at Esalen?" I said, Evolving Masculinity. And he's like, "We all just signed up for that event."
No way. I did not know that. So, okay. So listeners, so basically so we're going to start over on that. We're going to need to edit this part out. Okay. So first of all, I did not know that. Okay. Listeners, I want to back up for a second. So I'm in a CEO forum. I've been in the CEO forum, no joke, since 2006, 16 years I've been in this forum. So it's me and 7 other CEOs, and we meet. I live in Texas, so I fly to California for events. We meet, monthly, either virtually or in person. A few times a year we meet in person. And so in September 19, we planned a retreat at Esalen for this. I mean, it's going to sound a little, weird for people that maybe are not in touch with their masculine side, but it was the future of masculinity, which on paper sounds like a little hippie-ish. I was like, all right, I'm up for it. Whatever, we'll see how it goes. But it's at Esalen, which has a kind of a hippie vibe. And so it turns out that I did not know this, that Nathanael, you were teaching. I obviously found that out when we were there. You were teaching the event we were going to the event, not knowing you were teaching at the event. And then it turns out that you're teaching the event that we're already planning on going to. Wow.
Synchronicity. Okay. And now what does that have to say about what you and I are here to talk about today? Because what did we do there? We kind of gathered in advance of the workshop. And we're like, what is happening here, guys? You are a forum who has stayed together over the long term because you've involved your personal lives and your families in your forum relationships. Some of you, like Darius, are bringing it into your businesses. And wait a minute, is there a third element here? Is there some plant medicine maybe involved sometimes?
Oh my God, are we going to plant medicine? Yes, we are going to plant medicine today.
So what does that have to do with the future of human development and what it means to be in a closely knit group, having a deep dive experience at somewhere like Esalen, or somewhere at the top of the mountain?
Yeah, and so Nathaniel, you're jumping the gun, man. I was going to set that all up. Nathaniel, I love you, man. So we meet at Esalen, and we do this really intense weekend, and we end up doing a bunch of shadow work. You do Byron Katie's the work, so we did some of that. We did some wrestling, which was pretty cool. But yeah, we went deep that weekend, and I got to know you as well as one can in a deep weekend. And from there, it's been an interesting relationship. I ended up finishing Stegen. You have a business called Palæstra Leadership, which is where you're working with businesses, entrepreneurs, really helping them level up. And so you end up working with an organization, Paragon, who a bunch of my friends over there. And we ended up doing some work together where you presented at GOT, at Gathering of Titans this year, where I was the chair. So we've gotten over the last 2 years to spend some time together, getting to know one another, whether it be at Esalen or MIT. And today we're here to talk about a bunch of amazing things, most notably about your new project, Awakening Leadership. So I'm super pumped to talk about that, as well as to really touch on some of the stuff you're doing at Palæstra and wherever the rabbit hole may take us, because as I can only imagine, Nathaniel, the rabbit hole is deep and windy with you. So
it is deep. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, man, I'd love for you to maybe start off by giving the listeners a little bit of origin story on, how did you end up in this conscious leadership realm, working with leaders, really working in this deeper level, doing the work around awakening leadership. But yeah, I'd love for you to give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do it, and happy to be here again with you, Darius. So origin story bullet points would be to say my wife and I, Elizabeth, were raised in Fairfield, Iowa with transcendental meditation. So the school was actually based around consciousness-based education. So we had meditation as part of our schooling. We had principles of Eastern spirituality that had all to do with what leaders may know of as leadership development, but also the goal of meditation, which is development of higher states of consciousness or expanded states of consciousness. And I think another good analog, we have a mutual friend, Tony Lilios, who was in a documentary years ago that I got to go to the debut of here in Santa Barbara at the film festival, called Crossing Bhutan. And it was a perfect metaphor for what the community I was raised in calls 200% of life, spiritual and material, consciousness and capitalism. So Crossing Bhutan kind of took that theme on, in the sense that Bhutan is a country that measures gross domestic product like everywhere else, and they measure gross domestic happiness. So I think the reason that's such a perfect metaphor is that's how I was raised, that the material value of life can eclipse what's really meaningful and important, the qualitative side of life. So that was there very early on for me.
Can I ask a question? So I've just, I've been in, I got interested in meditation through Doug Irwin, who's another forum mate of mine. And we actually just had a TM, a transcendental meditation practitioner, come and speak to our group. So that was founded in Iowa. Is that correct? Is that what you just said?
Well, the founder is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was famous for teaching the Beatles, who basically inspired my parents and everyone else to want to learn how to meditate. And actually, Esalen is thought of as the birthplace of the human potential movement, which means Eastern spirituality was meeting Western psychology in some sense for the first time. So Maharishi was part of that era in the 50s and 60s, that we think of as kind of blossoming in human consciousness, that there was an increased awareness about human rights and ecology and what it meant for people to have spiritual practices that were gathering principles from across multiple cultures. So really that's where it all began. He was based in India, and then the university Maharishi Mahesh Yogi founded in Iowa was in the center of the country. Actually, it was in Santa Barbara at first, and they bought a university called Parsons in the late 70s for about $1 million. And so we got relocated to the center of the country.
Wait,
I might otherwise have grown up in Santa Barbara.
No way. So
which is where I live now, of course.
Right. No, I mean,
perhaps to make up for it. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm like, all right, we're in Santa Barbara, beautiful place. It's the university. We're going to make this the central university for TM in the United States. And then they're like, no, let's go to Iowa. Who made that decision? Was this all about, was it about money, or was it about
probably the CFO, because the price was right on that whole university. So
yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, I went to college at UC Santa Barbara. I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, and I had this moment. I talked about this on the show a couple weeks ago, where I was at a party. So do you know UCSB at all? Like
a little bit. I know Isla Vista, that area.
Yeah, so Isla Vista is where all the students live. So it's basically like college ghetto. It's just like a bunch of kids. There's thousands and thousands of kids living in like 2 square miles. Mm-hmm. And there's a street called Del Playa, which is literally like one side of it's mountain facing and one side of it's ocean facing. The one that's mountain facing, the backyard is the Pacific Ocean. And so I went to a party, and I say all this because for listeners that don't know Santa Barbara, it'll help you appreciate the move from Santa Barbara to Iowa a little more. I went to a party there once when I was 21 years old, and we're in the backyard and literally like overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And I remember saying to somebody, I said, "Where do you go from here?" like if you're 21,
Iowa, obviously.
So your parents they went to Iowa specifically for why did they choose? Because were they involved in the university? Like, why did they choose that?
Yeah, they wanted us to be raised in a community that had meditation built into it and consciousness-based education, and oriented around a lot of the values that they cherished. There's organic food and quality time at home, balanced with academics and college prep. So it was a private school still, so it was kind of buttoned up in that way. We wore uniforms, but still was spiritually integrated. And I also got into Aikido as a kid at 13. So that was we all did karate in the 80s, so there was that briefly. But Aikido is a martial art, which is a spiritually minded martial art. It's about nonviolent conflict resolution and harmonizing with the energy of an attack. So that was very aligned with my mindset growing up in terms of spirituality and spiritual integration. And also self-inquiry, the enemy is within and all of that. And so that's where it began. I ultimately lived in the dojo for Aikido for almost 2 years, had a bit of a burnout, disillusion experience there. And surprise, surprise, once I'd internalized my own sense of authority, I actually crossed the aisle from east to west, from the traditional martial arts to the modern combat sports, where I started getting into Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts and kickboxing and wrestling and all of that. Wrecked my body doing that. Was also doing a master's degree in integral psychology and professional coaching at Johns Hopkins University in the Bay Area. This was all in the Bay Area at the time. Had Dr. Bert Parlee, as my mentor coach. He's a senior advisor and executive coach at Stegen. So fast forwarding everything, we had the first integral theory conference in 2008. And at the panel they had for coaching, they announced that they had one executive coaching position. And I kind of went to Bert afterwards. I'm like, what do you think? What are my chances? And he's like, don't worry about it. Your whole background is tailor-made for Stegen.
Yeah.
It's just capitalism. It's elite athletics and martial arts, and it's integral theory. Whole systems change, transformation, hero's journey. So that was a very important moment in my life. And I went from coaching kind of mid-level managers and teaching martial arts lessons and leading workshops. Oh, and substitute teaching to coaching CEOs. And I say I just coach big kids now instead of the ones I would substitute teach in middle school and high school. So that was a big transformation in my life there.
I want to take a step back, and then I want to jump to the move at Stegen. So I often tell people, I go, man, and I didn't know this about you. I said, like, nobody teaches their kids that they should be mindful, and I'm actually wrong. Your parents did. Like, this is something like you're the first person I've ever met who was brought up in an environment where that was part of the upbringing. So when you went to school in Iowa, this private school, how many kids were in that school?
Because we were the kids of boomers, that's when there were a lot more kids in the school. There could have been 1,000. It still wasn't a big school. So my graduating class had about 40 or 45 people.
And so,
this was like pretty small, but
was it K through college or K through 12? Like how?
All the way through PhD. So they had the university as well, which is where I did my undergrad.
Wow. Okay. So kindergarten all the way through graduate school, based around this idea of consciousness and transcendental meditation. This is like the foundation of this university and pre-college school. And so so do you remember, like, how old were you when you first learned how to meditate? Do you remember?
Well, my mother would say I was meditating in the womb. So that was kind of hardwired. But technically you learn an eyes open walking meditation when you're 4. And you technically would learn a seated meditation, eyes closed, when you're 10. I believe those of us who grew up there learned when we were 9. And that is what's very much different about a culture that's not just oriented to the material world, to outward success or achievement, but again, is balancing that with the cultivation of a sense of self, and that knowing that that path is the path of spiritual awakening that can answer all of the big questions about who am I and why are we here? What are we doing here? Where are we going? Is there any meaning to any of this at all? Are we on a hero's journey? Or does it matter in the end if we die? So there's very big questions that most people keep their head down in their material lives, and maybe they grow a fantastic business and sell it, and then what happens? They wonder what the meaning of all of it was.
Yeah,
so they tend to start asking those questions later.
Well, it's funny. So I was brought up in a family that was anti-religious. My father was brought up Muslim, is from in Iran, and my mother was brought up in like a steel mill town in Pennsylvania where everyone was Catholic for the most part. And so they were anti-religious completely. There was zero religion in my home, like literally zero. And so I had a lot of friends who were brought up Christian, and they were always trying to like mission me to like join the church. And I just remember not really having kind of I guess for lack of better words, an aversion towards it because my parents were against it. And I remember just having this belief that, I believe in God, but there was probably moments where I didn't believe in God, but where I didn't really question the fact that there was no spirituality or religion in my family. That was nothing. There was no mindfulness. I learned how to meditate when I was 40, and through like strife, right? Through pain, where I was like, I got to do something about this. So I do think that's really interesting.
If I can just add one thing there, is it's important to understand about TM or meditation, mindfulness. We had whatever religion we wanted to have growing up in Fairfield. And meditation was just a supplement that allowed us to deepen our own internal experience. So people, like I was raised Jewish and bar mitzvah and everything else, and other people went to church or no church.
So it's funny, even the fact that you qualified what you just did. Like my perspective, like as an adult now, and I want to get into this later, is, and I told you this before we got on the air. I said, look, I had a godly experience, and so meditation has been a tool for me to like connect with the higher power, right? This is coming from someone who has never prayed in his life. This is coming from someone that believes in a higher spirituality in God, but has never done anything with it. But I'm starting to equate that this is a way to connect to a higher power, I guess. And it doesn't sound like that's how it was brought up to you. It was brought to you more as connecting with yourself. And then you could leverage a religious dogma, I guess, to to have a, I guess, a version of that connection. Am I thinking of that the right way?
Yeah, I think what's really important to understand about spiritual practice or religion is that you have the understanding or the belief, and then you have the experience.
Right.
And what I like to say about this is science and religion, or science and spirituality, in a sense, if they don't have that element of direct experience, it is two sides of the same coin. Religious fundamentalists believe in something. Scientists believe in nothing, but no one knows.
Right.
So we're going to go back to some very ancient terms, like the Greeks used the term gnosis, which is where we get the term Gnostic. It has to do with mysticism. What that word doesn't mean it's mysterious, although there is a great mystery. But the point is that you can know yourself. That's what it said outside the Oracle at Delphi. Know yourself. What does that mean? Like direct experience. You can know through direct experience. Then you don't have to believe in something or believe in nothing.
Interesting. So I want to, I'm so excited to go here with you, but I want to move in a somewhat linear path because I feel like you having me learning about this. I for whatever reason, I knew you were from Iowa. I never realized that was why you grew up in Iowa until you just said it on the show. So you end up at Stagen, which again, anyone out there that wants to learn, Stagen's a very amazing program. It's a conscious leadership program. You were to your mentor instructor's point, like tailor made for Stagen. It's an athletic based, martial art based, practice based, conscious capitalist leadership program where some of the top leaders in the country go to really learn how to build a better organization. And, as we say in Stagen, with the leadership goes the organization, right? And I always butcher that a little bit, but tell us about that. So you started working, you went from working with kids and working in the dojo, and I know you still do a lot of stuff in the dojo, to working with CEOs. What was that like to make that transition for you?
Well, I think initially I was hired there, and I call it putting on my white belt again, because then you're the rookie and they need to test you out. Like, how high level a CEO can you coach? Because we know that it's a serious thing to hold a room of executives, especially in a strategic planning session, for example, and not just a leadership development where the stakes are lower. So I slowly cut my teeth. They kind of let me coach EO people and then YPOers, and then they let me lead retreats, form retreats and chapter level, president level retreats, doing the work with people. So I kind of had that inbuilt superpower, both as someone who could do deep transformational work, and the selling point in my personal brand was that I was a black belt martial artist who could kick your butt. So there was some level of respect that was garnered to me in terms of the mastery path and what I'd committed to in myself as a leader and how I'd been trained. So that's, it was, I would say, challenging at first. And I also felt like I was actually further ahead than I thought coming in. And what's great about the Integral Leadership Program is it is practice-based. So the metaphor of the dojo really was a fit, as Jocko Willink will talk about too. Leadership skills are like jiu-jitsu techniques. You get better when you practice them. And you get better when you practice them, especially when you get live feedback, when there's something on the line, when you're on the mat, as I like to say. So that's initially what it was like. And at one point, my dojo was actually inside of the office at Stagen, which was kind of part of the fulfillment of my vision to have that community of practice inside of the business and us eating our own cooking and all of that. And that was also the inspiration for me kind of setting out to do my own thing. I also enrolled a 6-month program for the work in leadership. So a very deep self-inquiry, transformational process. And that's always been part of what I love to do is you don't get better watching me train. So at a certain point, I tell my clients, it's like, you're a consumer of coaching, you're a client, and that's okay. And you need to be the coach who coaches your team. And so the way we help scale leadership development and core values and all of that through companies is through a peer coaching process. But it really does require that the leader go first.
And
what do you,
what do you think? Sorry to interrupt, but on that note, and like I've now, since exiting my business, I ended up, working with entrepreneurs and doing, I think it's really more management consulting and less coaching, because holding space is not, I'm not, it's not, I've had enough people say like, this is not really coaching what you're doing. You're really like, cause I'm not holding space for them that much. We're like strategizing and just kind of like, and I'm telling them what to do a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody, but I'm giving them a lot of feedback from like a strategic perspective, which I think is different than coaching. I think that's more advisory work. And at least it's a different form of it. But I find that there's multiple types of leaders, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to characterize everyone differently, but I try to not be a jerk about it and say I got my A students and my C students, right? But I got, I have people that really, I do think, and I've worked with all sorts of leaders at this point, like dozens. And what I've found, and I was always a CEO. And so as a CEO, I'm a former athlete. I was a wrestler in college and in high school. I played sports my whole childhood. I'm my number one strengths achiever. I'm hardcore, go do it well. I consider myself fairly coachable. So this is the first time outside of when you're the CEO in an organization, if someone's not coachable and they report to you or report to someone who reports to you, you fire them. Like at least you probably should, if you want what's best for the organization. Now, but as a coach or as a consultant or as an advisor, like you don't have that power. I mean, you can fire a client, I guess, but what I found was that there's all sorts of leaders out there. My question for you is, having worked with tons of leaders, and you've worked with some really high level leaders. I mean, like, we don't need to go into your roster, but I know you've worked with some really high level leaders. What do you find as far as people's, is there like a spectrum of willingness to learn or an open-mindedness around this higher level, this conscious leadership, this higher level of leadership? Or is it, what are your thoughts around that? Like, what do you think separates those that are more willing versus those that are less willing?
It's a very interesting question. And not only have I coached high level leaders, I've coached other CEO coaches who run their own coaching practices. And what I can say about that is even people who approach working with me and then choose not to. And why do they choose not to work with me? I typically will only work with someone if they're willing to do the deep work themselves first as a leader. So in the cases I've skipped past doing that deep work with the leader, I've failed, but only 100% of the time. You don't want to get further down the organization and have that CEO like pressure testing you with their team, trying you out, evaluating you. You also don't want to get into a situation where you become codependent, where they think you're there to fix their team. As I joked in our last episode, it's like dropping your kids off at the therapist. There's something off about that. And so for me, there's something synonymous with the leader's willingness to do the deep work and conscious leadership. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. If you do not have a higher purpose or higher power as a leader for yourself and for your company, what does that make you? A materialist. Now, the sad part of that is you're going to get the success later, perhaps, but without the fulfillment. It will be fool's gold. You'll sell your company and wonder what it was all for. So a conscious leader is in service to higher purpose, higher power. Again, what if you don't have that? That's also what we call the ego playing God, also known as a dictator. So the first step of conscious leadership is being aware of what unconscious leadership is when you're leading from your ego. If you do not empower your team to freedom of speech, you're not actually running a democratic organization or having a democratic dynamic on your executive team, which means you are, again, the dictator. So the first thing that I'm helping people realize is that by their own willingness to pick up the mirror, instead of saying, who hired all these idiots, there's something synonymous about self-reflection and leadership itself that has to do with self-leadership. I need to be a check and balance because I'm the one that's checking and balancing. I need to have a check and balance because I'm the one who's checking and balancing everything else in this organization. and I can empower my team to do that. Is your team empowered to tell you when you aren't walking the talk, when you aren't living your core values? Maybe. Or what? Who wants to be the first one to test out what happens when you tell the boss where his blind spots are? So that is what disrupts the dynamic and leads to the kind of Zen basketball team flow, getting to coherence, getting to interdependence, getting to high performance, where the best ideas win and not the biggest egos, where there's a collective intelligence that comes online. And that's what I see with very high performing teams. But as the leader goes, so goes the team.
Yeah,
so it's entirely incumbent upon the team, upon the leader, to make that clear and to empower that. And what does this have to do with what's going on in the world at large today, with threats to democracy, with nationalism, with being so internally divided around all of that?
Do you think that yeah, like touching on that is, and I mean, you kind of made a comment a second ago around this collective, leadership, right? And I don't think you used that word specifically. You said the word collective and then something else, but
collective intelligence.
Yeah, collective intelligence. Excuse me.
Team coherence or team flow. Yeah, interdependence.
Right. So I think that there's something there around this collective intelligence, right? And I guess to get kind of, for lack of better words, like spiritual on this, what resonance are we talking about? Are we talking about a higher resonance, right? And where the team's, coming from a place of gratitude and love and joy and really trying to elevate and create value from that higher resonance? Or are we talking about it coming from a lower resonance, and which is going to be the fear-based, greed-based, lack of abundance-based, motivations? And I think that I at least believe that there's this kind of massive divide that's happening right now. You have a renaissance from the perspective of the plant medicine that's happening, that's having a massive renaissance right now. I think that is really more of a reflection of a bigger consciousness that's happening, right? That's the tool that's being used to help facilitate that. But below that, if we start to look at society, let's use the United States of America, for example, I think that the divide is all low resonance behavior, greed, power, that hungry ghost wanting to win, right? It's not about the greater good of the entire country. It's about being right. It's about my side winning over your side. And I said, I made a comment to somebody where I said, all right, so I'm a moderate, by the way, so I'm kind of in the middle politically.
Mm-hmm.
And so fine, your side wins. This is not a good country if 39% of the country is pissed. It's just not. 61% stoked and 39% pissed. That's like a civil war, like, so that's not a win. Even if so what? You're right. A win is where most people feel like we're moving in the same direction, and most being not just 51%, it's probably more like 80%, where you got the 20% are never going to be happy, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on when we start to try to operate at this higher intelligence, and how you think we can get there. Because I've talked to Rand about this, Rand Stagen, and his perspective is there's going to be pain before there's prosperity. And that we're in this really interesting, curious, potentially dangerous time. And my thought is that leadership starts, like, I think the entrepreneurs and leaders in organizations are the groundswell that can kind of fix society's problems. Because I don't think it can happen through government. I don't think it can happen through society by themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
So all of your good work with core values is a very good example. Conscious leadership, all that means is, again, aligning with a higher purpose and higher power, a reason beyond making a profit that also can help you earn a profit. And that first step of, okay, I'm willing to be conscious, which means I'm not going to lead from my ego. I'm not going to be the dictator arguing with reality, fighting what happens, fighting with life. There's some sense of core values being a covenant. Like, I'm going to build something that has a value beyond just making a profit. And the core values are the things that we align around over, above, and beyond how we transact. And that's where conscious businesses are the best examples of cultures where people go to grow. And why is that so important to orient around core values? Well, how are you reacting otherwise? And what are you contributing to the world? You may as well be a materialist or godless in some way. And that shows up. Whether you believe in God or not, it doesn't matter, because basically where that leaves you is in judgment of other people. Like you said, my side is right, your side is wrong. The fundamental definition of a judgment is like seeing other people's worldview only for its unhealthy characteristics and seeing your own worldview only for its healthy characteristics. So we can't even get aligned around values being things that we all value. And there's a difference between my side being right versus your side and my own actual capacity for independent thought, which means my ability to get into the third person objective perspective and argue both sides. We've lost how to do that to some extent. And this goes all the way back to Plato and the foundation of a republic. The republic depends upon the education of the citizen. So if we don't learn how to think and think about thinking and orient to what we value, then all we're left to do is judge other people and be in that right or wrong fixed mindset kind of space where I'm smart or I'm stupid according to my group, instead of looking at what's really true, what works or doesn't work here, apart from what group it belongs to. Think about what happens on the mainstream media. If you say anything that doesn't toe the party line, you get kicked out of the group.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with the truth. And then it leaves us with a hall of mirrors. We're all pointing the finger at each other. We even psychologically are more intelligent, which may be the silver lining, because we know what the word gaslighting and projection means.
Right.
Each side is saying the other side is gaslighting them, meaning blaming them for the thing they're guilty of. And it makes you feel crazy because it feels like there's no ground to stand on. What is the antidote to that situation?
Yeah, I don't have an answer.
It is self-knowledge. It's getting right with yourself. It is picking up your own core values. And it doesn't matter if you belong to a religion or have a spiritual practice. It doesn't matter what your values are, but it matters that you have them. And it matters that you reflect on them. Because whether you are congruent and aligned as a leader will be the difference between whether you suffer or whether you are free. Meaning, when you point the finger, there are these three fingers inconveniently pointing back. So my suffering comes from judging you for what I'm guilty of myself. And this is the Jungian notion of the shadow. So if I'm capable in a similar way morally, not just what's right and wrong, let's argue both sides, get in the third person position and evaluate what's actually true, like we do in martial arts. What does it mean to be a moral person? It means that you need to be able to internalize your own inner sense of self-authority. And when someone says to you, you're off there, search inside yourself. Am I innocent? Is what they're saying incorrect? Or am I guilty? And my ability to look at my own core values and see where I'm walking the talk or not, and whether I'm congruent. Again, if I find my own innocence, having examined myself, looked in the mirror, that's what Gandhi called truth force. I'm congruent. I have integrity. Then I can take to the streets and protest.
So No, I'm curious. So I'm curious, and I don't know the data on this. I wonder, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but I wonder how much emotional intelligence comes into play here, right? And so if
there is data on that, yeah.
Right. So like, I'd be really curious to see if you were to rank people's EQ right now, right? Has there been a shift in EQ, or maybe let's just say there hasn't been a shift in EQ? I would assume people have a higher EQ now than they did 50 years ago. I would assume that society is more open-minded in a lot of ways. One could argue against that, but I mean, there's things that exist today that didn't exist 50 years ago from a societal acceptance standpoint, whether you're talking about LGBTQ or civil rights. And there's a lot of stuff that we are willing to entertain that there's never would have been entertained in the 1950s, right? When this was a more peaceful country. So I don't think that I don't think my grandparents had a higher EQ than I do, right? Like not at all. So I don't think that,
Not at all, yeah.
So I think that we have a higher EQ now, probably. I'm just guessing. But my question would be, if the answer is to know thyself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I heard you just say.
Yeah.
If the answer is for us to be able to self-reflect and to be honest with ourselves.
Yes.
How do we create more of that? Is it through this idea of conscious leadership, and then like a groundswell of conscious leaders spreading conscious leadership and getting more people to know that themselves through the leaders themselves knowing themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
Even if we don't want to use that as a brand and we want to stay with the most fundamental categories that exist in life, leadership itself does mean living your own core values. And again, no one has to have traditional values to reflect on themselves, but it matters that they do reflect on their own core values. Whether we call that leadership or conscious leadership or self-development or human development, that is what's needed. And it's funny, if you go all the way back to the Hebrew word for prayer, it literally, tefillah, it comes from a word that literally means to judge or evaluate oneself, as in a court of law, So this is back to the point about, can I get on the side of the prosecution and look at myself? And so help me God, like to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Right.
To know the difference between my tricky ego and all of its defenses and my tendency to want to deny and blame the other person. And could they be right? Am I guilty of what I'm judging you for? And if I find where that's true, it's ego death. I'm not the victim and you're not the villain anymore. I now owe amends for my own shortcoming. There's a lot of research on psychological safety and trust and what builds trust. And my theory about why making amends for not walking the talk of core values is so important is that that's the kind of thing that allows a conflict or a breakdown to lead to a breakthrough or a deeper level of trust, because you see that someone is willing to tell the truth when they're wrong. And that's the opposite of tyranny, of like being infallible and hunting down your political enemies. So the data also says that basically on the EQ tests they give people for self-awareness, 80% of people say they are self-aware and 20% of people actually are.
Oh, it's so funny. I was going to say
lines perfectly with one other data point, which is that 80% of people go to the water cooler and complain about their boss, saying that he or she has a blind spot that all of them know about, but none of them talk about.
Wow.
So it kind of lines up perfectly in that way. So how self-aware are we? And worse than that, if we have an ego or a tyrant running the show inside of us, and we even say things like, yeah, I really want to know what you think, but then we punish people when they do, well, you're going to get the culture you deserve there as well.
Wow. I literally was like, I bet you it's only 20% that know themselves. I was like,
and maybe that's being generous once we get into the world of politics.
yeah, 2%. Man, I want to pivot a little bit because right now, you've been doing the work with your Palæstra Leadership business in businesses, and I feel like there's been this, we've talked offline about some of the deeper work you're doing, some of the maybe more exotic work you're doing. And, I know before the show, you talked about how, hey, you want to, you're going kind of big on this awakening leadership movement / business. Tell us about this. I mean, I want to hear, we've talked a little bit about it when we were in MIT, but I'd love for you to kind of educate our listeners about this movement around plant medicine and really integrating that. And really when we start talking about the higher intelligence, why you're interested in this and how you think this can be a tool for people to really elevate as leaders and for themselves as, I guess, humans.
Yeah. And I think the MIT presentation will be good to draw from as well. to make a kind of positional worldview level statement about what I think is going on, given the problems we just described
Right.
at the root cause, it could be that the psychedelic renaissance is occurring now as part of a kind of spiritual regeneration that is built around direct experience of mystical states of consciousness, expanded states of consciousness that in a materialistic paradigm have gone almost totally missing. So if you think about the meaning crisis that we're in now, even if you believe there's something, you may have the doubt underneath because you don't know. So although there is research that talks about, much to the chagrin of more atheistic types, that people who have religion in their life are happier and more fulfilled and that sort of thing. But when you get to the materialistic level and you look at the data and the mental health crisis, 18% of Americans are clinically depressed.
Wow.
That's about 40 million people, I think. And our outcomes have not changed very much. This research on SSRIs has just been kind of overturned as if you could just adjust a level of a neurotransmitter in your brain, and that's all it took to be fulfilled and happy in life. And we're more likely to die from the food we eat than from not enough food. We're more likely to die by suicide than all war and crime. More likely to die from old age than from disease. So it's clearly not for lack of being the most materially sophisticated society on the planet. And yet there are these diseases of despair that are so prevalent. And it could be that the psychedelic renaissance is here to help to start to usher in a new wave of development of consciousness. And why would that be timely now? Because back to Plato again, I believe we need to evolve the stage of development beyond adulthood. Because these polarities across different camps have become so intractable that it's going to take a next level of leadership to start to heal those splits and bring us all together. And that's exactly what a leader would do. So all of that to say, my new offering, Awakening Leadership, is a plant medicine retreat in Costa Rica that is actually a forum membership where leaders who are seeking to self-actualize can have a genuine mystical experience. And there's a lot of science on this. Psychedelics are the space where science and spirituality are coming together. And that, again, you don't ever have to believe a word I say. This is being democratized. That you can know yourself. And, we used the red pill video from the Matrix at Stegen year after year. And it's like, well, that's not a metaphor. It's a myth that is a metaphor, but it's a metaphor for an inner experience that you can have through plant medicine. And it's been used through thousands of years, not just in indigenous cultures, but into the foundations of our own Western civilization. The ancient Greeks had a 9-day religious festival and many mystery cults, but the most popular was called the Eleusinian Mysteries. So people traveled 13 miles northwest from Athens to Eleusis. And this was a state-sanctioned 9-day festival that had at the center of it a psychedelic, what people believe to be a psychedelic potion called the Kukion. And there's research recently that found hard archaeochemical evidence that this was the case. The ancient Greeks were using psychedelics to find God.
Wait,
this went on for almost 2,000 years.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm dying here. What is Kukion? What is it made out of?
So this is in the late 70s. Gordon Wasson, Carl Rock, and Albert Hofmann, who synthesized LSD, posited a theory on the road to Eleusis. For those interested, you can follow Brian Morescu's work with The Immortality Key, The Secret History of the Religion with No Name. But right at the beginning of the war on drugs, they said that because what we know from ancient texts is that it was barley and mint, and that Albert Hofmann had extracted LSD from a fungus that grows on grain, ergot, they posited that that was likely the active ingredient, Kukion. So like
LSD.
an LSD infused beer, because it was something like the grain that also kind of brewed some kind of beer.
No way. Okay.
So that is what was going on in ancient Greece, a very non-rational, mystical experience that gave rise to what we think of as Western rational logic, mathematics, sports. All of the things that we think of as a rational Western society really had their roots in a mystical experience.
Wait. So press the pause button. So you said this went on for 2,000 years, this 9-day festival where people essentially drank LSD beer. And this is pre like all the modern, sciences that came out of, ancient Greece. You're saying this was
alongside science.
Oh, right when those things were coming out.
Some would say they traveled to the underworld to meet with a goddess who gave them knowledge about mathematics.
Whoa.
And what is the hard data that Brian's book, I don't want to steal the thunder from that fun journey. It reads like a real life Indiana Jones or Da Vinci Code. But basically, they found evidence that it was ergot in one of these little canthros, these little ceremonial vessels that they would drink from.
What's the name of this book?
The Immortality Key.
I can't wait to read it.
Of the religion with no name.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read this book. This is like making my book list. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So you are now, you're going down this journey with, and I guess let's take a step back, because some listeners might be like, dude, are they talking about doing drugs and mushrooms, right? Like, and for like, I'm not new to the world of plant medicine, and I have friends that have really like opened my eyes onto the potentially spiritual effects, the emotional effects. I mean, I've seen massive transformations in people that have struggled with a lot of like things in their life, and because of their work in this way, like, I mean, I've watched with my own eyes people become like excessively better human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in a way where where like it kind of blows your mind a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So for a listener that isn't like as in the know, talk a little bit about this. Like, obviously in the 70s, the war on drugs. Oh, LSD's bad. Drugs are bad. Nancy Reagan, just say no. So you and I are children of the 80s, right? So
mm-hmm.
I believe I'm a little older than you, but
I saw the egg frying in the frying pan, and this is your brain on drugs and all that.
Yeah, Dad, I learned it from watching you. By the way, Nancy Reagan, every kid made fun of that shit, and then they went and did drugs anyway. There was a huge war on drugs, and so a lot of this stuff has been poo-pooed, even though there was scientific data saying that, hey, this can help the mentally ill. Hey, this can help stop, alcohol abuse and addiction. And there's a book by Michael Pollan. I think it's like, this is what's the name of his book again? You know what I'm talking about?
That's exactly where I was going to go as well. It's called How to Change Your Mind. And if you have an open enough mind, even his trip treatment article in the New Yorker was what changed my mind. Because again, I grew up with meditation and a bit of a meditator's bias around substances and drugs. I still have never smoked a thing short of a peace pipe to this day. I didn't drink till I was maybe 23, and drink seldomly, because to a meditator, like, your body's the vehicle for experiencing these expanded states of consciousness, which is ironic,
right? Because
that's exactly what these psychedelics are doing, is allowing you to open the doors of perception. But the science behind it is gathering a lot of momentum. And Michael Pollan covers all of that research in his book. And he's somewhat of an experiential writer, as people know. So he goes on the journeys and describes his first-person experience, which is the best part of that book. And even better, go to the docuseries. It just came out on Netflix a couple months ago. And you can watch 4 different episodes, one on each different medicine. And I think it's important to say this before we go further. What is a drug? This is what kind of opened my mind about reading his article. A drug masks symptoms, and it perpetuates an addiction cycle. It suppresses symptoms. What is a medicine? It's supposed to be what heals at a root cause level. Plant medicine, as you just said, has been shown to heal addiction to drugs. How backwards is it in our materialistic society that what we call medicine are drugs like fentanyl. It's 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. And plants that grow out of the ground all over the world, like mushrooms and peyote cacti and so on, are called drugs and made illegal. So that was the first eye-opener for me. And that some of these, there's almost no recreational use of. You can't recreationally use ayahuasca very well. And
hey,
I would argue...
It's like, hey, okay, what do you want, a beer? No, I'm gonna have some ayahuasca, and start puking and totally going crazy, right? Like, yeah, no way.
And there are no lethal dosages of mushrooms, of marijuana. Of course, there are lethal dosages of all kinds of hard drugs like heroin and even cigarettes. How many people are cigarettes alone still killing every year?
Alcohol is great too, right? Alcohol.
So, if you go look at the data, the harm to self and other, what is at the top of the list of substances?
Probably alcohol, I would assume.
Yeah, it's heroin, meth, alcohol. What's at the very bottom? Mushrooms.
Wait, heroin and meth are above alcohol? Is that like on a per capita base? It must be per capita because there's way less heroin addicts than there are alcoholics, I would assume.
Well, and I don't know the downstream effects of drunk driving. If they factor that in or not. So,
yeah, I was going to say, like I've met way more people who have dealt with the side effects of like alcohol abuse than drug abuse. I'm not to say that one's better than the other, but I think that, look, I can go to the store right now, I can buy a fifth of Jack, and I can buy as much alcohol as I want. And if you wanted to get anything, whether it's plant medicine or another drug, good luck. It's a process, right? Like, I've yet to meet someone who wanted drugs that couldn't get them. But it's not, I'm sure it's how I go into the corner store to get some, right? So there's definitely, we've created regulation to inhibit the legal procurement of whether it be plant medicine or hard drugs or soft drugs, whatever you want to call it. And yet we have this total acceptance of alcohol, which has, tons of health issues. And there's, it's fun, man. I like to drink a little bit, but I guess intellectually, I have a tough time with it. I'm also a person that believes that everything should be legal. So, like, intellectually, I'm like, look, this doesn't make sense, right? Like, who's to say one is worse than the other, right? Especially when you start looking at the data, and the data says, hey, like, there's a ton of societal effects of alcohol, yet we totally make it legal and nobody questions it, right?
Well, we're very good, again, in a Western society in having a punitive orientation to crime when we don't offer people rehabilitation, whether it's prison or with mental health issues or the relationship between those two things. There's a lack of orientation to actually healing at a root cause level because those are the drugs that mask those symptoms. Why would someone not want to drink or not want to punish themselves horribly? This is about the disconnection that we have from our spirituality as well. What would be the reason not to drink? And that's what these plant medicines can start to offer direct experience into. And the research on psilocybin alone is shocking. It's the very data point that had me turn my head. Ongoing and to this day, Roland Griffiths and the research they've done at Johns Hopkins says 75% of people, and these are everyday people off the street who don't have any previous experience, they have one high dose of psilocybin with the right set and setting, meaning it's a inward journey, not a recreational outward journey, and with the support of therapists or guides. They say it is, 75% of people say it is one of the 5 most meaningful experiences of their lives, and the 25% that remain say it's the single defining mystical experience of their life.
Wow.
So my mind that has to know everything, my Jewish mind, was like, well, what the heck is going on in there? And Michael Pollan even says it's kind of seemed like it was too good to be true. Like, this is a panacea, like a unified field theory of mental illness, like one thing can cure everything. And then he's like, but it kind of is. And how strange that you go in to something that is a metaphysical or a subjective experience that doesn't, like Ritalin or SSRIs, like pull the levers on any neurotransmitters in your brain. You experience something that's subjective. And then healing happens downstream from that on the physical level. Like smoking quits you, alcoholism quits you. I had one friend who's like, he had an LSD journey, and long story short, he was smoking a pack a day at the time. He took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and went to light it. This is on LSD. And the cigarette went into the future and visually curved back onto his own temple. And he said he saw that he was killing himself in that moment, and he literally never smoked again. Not a single cigarette.
That's crazy.
So that's kind of a visual illustration of it. But the science is also saying things that seem to be superlative, like 80% smoking cessation with 3 cognitive behavioral sessions and 3, moderate doses of psilocybin. And of course, we need to be careful. The science is still being done. Some very good companies, MAPS and Compass Pathways is doing research, Simon, to affirm. We don't want to get overzealous about the results, because it's not just about, that would be the irony of what's going on, is trying to commoditize plant medicine and make it like a pill you can take and then go home. Like, that's not the point either. I think there's a much bigger invitation that this medicine is inviting us into. And so long as we're going to someone else to be treated or be healed, we're still not getting to the place where we're tapping into our own capacity to heal ourselves, to treat ourselves, and even to have a spiritual experience temporarily. When does that translate actually to getting on the spiritual path? And I think that's what this medicine is inviting us into, and an actual commitment, like we do with leadership coaching, to the path of actual leadership development. That's why I do what I do with Palæstra. I don't like event-based trainings that start and stop. So my offering for awakening leadership is somewhat the same. I don't like spiritual tourism where you take a pill and you're all better. You're not going to go to Costa Rica for 5 nights and get enlightened. However, you will have, it's very likely that you will have some kind of a mystical experience that can heal you and help you self-actualize and grow as a leader. But you need, it's almost like absorbing vitamins that you take. You need to integrate the experience. And even that can't be an event that starts and stops. Again, you need to make it a practice, like in a martial art. So when will spiritual experiences give way to spiritual awakening, to the spiritual path? Don't people want to know, like, what the meaning of their life is?
Yeah.
Or do they want to wait till the end and, again, sell their business and go, what was the point of that?
Yeah, and whether you're selling a business or just really wanting to like level up, like again, the name of the show is The Greatness Machine. It's people creating greatness in the world, and greatness has, it's a subjective definition. But my belief, if you said, Darius, what do you believe greatness is? Greatness is doing what you were brought on this earth to do, and doing it well, and doing it loud, and doing it unapologetically, and that is my definition of self-actualizing. So when you start, so what better way to do that if you can, whether you're using the tools of a leadership development or leadership development coaching, or doing it even in a mystical way like you're describing. So I love the work you're doing, man. I think that we see so eye to eye on this, and this is cutting edge stuff. It's old, which is hilarious, because there's like, this is like some of the oldest stuff in the world that people are doing.
We call it the ancient future.
Yeah, it's the ancient technology that's like coming back strong. I know that we ran over a little bit here, but I'd love for you to kind of give an overview of what does this look like for people that want to learn more about awakening leadership, maybe get involved with the program. I know you're putting together a really interesting, it's really a program, if you will, multiple weeks of work, going to Costa Rica to have a mystical experience at the end of it, and then a reintegration. Talk us through what that looks like for those that are interested to learn more.
Yeah. So we are offering 2 forums right now, and we're launching them in October. So there'll be 3 months of prep work to kind of earn the right to go on the journey. 5 nights in Costa Rica at a beautiful, like Esalen in the jungle down there, called Imaloa Institute. If you go to awakeningleadership.org, you can see some of the videos of just how stunningly beautiful it is there. Really heart-centered staff and high quality food. They have 200-year-old Balinese homes that they reassembled on the cliff face with ocean views. So there's quite a range of accommodations there. And then, yes, we are going to integrate the experience afterwards for another 3 months. And I think, again, I'm redefining the term integration because leaders know that integration continues beyond them. So it was designed in a way, like that's the first step. If you just want to go on the journey, that's fine, but it is a forum membership. So if you re-up in your membership, then you're part of an intact group that's going to be your journey forum ongoing. And it ends up putting you into a biannual rhythm for retreat. And also, if you're part of an intact forum, let me know and we can do something for your whole forum together. It can be a way to go deeper with your existing forum. And then my work with Palæstra is also meant to be part of the integration. So if you want to go deeper in your own work, you can continue with the coaching and plant medicine. Or if you really want to integrate this into your company and lead a more conscious, core value-driven business, then that's what we're here to do. I hope that people who have a mystical experience would be more conscious as a leader when they go back to work and lead a more high-performing team as a result of transforming as a leader and create a better place to work where there's continuous learning and development and growth. And that's what we do. We really help create a team of coaches in a way where they're more high-performing because everyone's at the next level that way. And then really scale leadership and coaching and core values through the whole company. And that's, again, very much based upon my background as someone who grew up in a Sangha, a meditation community, and in the dojo. So it's very much that feeling of camaraderie and iron sharpens iron and a path that continues indefinitely.
And I love the work you're doing, Nathanael. You're such a badass. I mean, it's really cool. It's really cool. And I mean, just like, obviously, we've talked a lot offline about the work with Awakening Leadership, but the work you're doing with Palæstra, the conscious leadership work, I mean, you really are going in and changing organizations and really helping leaders level up and to see this other offering that is, it's more spiritual, maybe a little deeper, a little more exotic for people that want that, that's even more impactful, man. So I'm so excited for that work. And for those that are interested in learning more about that, we're going to put everything in the show notes, but where can people connect with you or learn more about either Palæstra or around the Awakening Leadership's work you're doing?
Yeah, awakeningleadership.org for that offering. The Palæstra, PALAESTRA.com for our in-house coaching offerings. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and all the usual suspects there. And we'll have to talk about God on our next episode.
I know. Shit. I didn't get to tell you about how I get to hang out with God every day. I've been hanging out with God every morning during my meditation. Till next time. But hey, Nathanael, thank you so much, my brother. Much gratitude.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate you and what you're doing. And congrats on the success. I think it's like 100x in the last year, or certainly 2. So glad it's getting out to the world and people are able to tune in with you.
Thank you. Yeah, as my friend Don DePani says, where your attention goes, your energy flows. So a lot of attention and energy on the podcast. With that said, everyone, thank you so much for listening. If you love the show, share it with your friends. This is how people learn, and this is how we can help our friends, is by spreading the word when we learn something new. And if you love the show, give us a thumbs up, give us a review. Appreciate you so much. Peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other.
And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.